Hey, how's it going? I have got 4 of Naturehikes UL 2-person tents. I've got the Summiture 2, the Cloud Up 2 Pro, the Mongar 2 UL, and the Star River 2 UL. And that's pretty much all of the 2-person ultralight Naturehike tents. I've omitted one, that's the Opulus 2. It's the tunnel tent. That one's over 2 kilos, has a really big footprint. It's just quite a different tent to these, but I think these are quite comparable. So I'm going to start off by doing the weight. And this is the weight of the tent body, fly, and poles only. There's no pegs and there's no ground sheets. So I'll start off with the Summiture. Now, bear in mind that this doesn't have any poles in it at all because it's a trekking pole tent. This weighs exactly 1.1 kilos. Now the Cloud Up 2 Pro. This weighs 1.33 kilos. Now the Mongar 2 UL weighs 1.48 kilos. And the Star River 2 UL. That weighs 1.47 kilos. Okay, that's all the inners set up, and I'm going to go around each tent one by one and show you the features that I think are good or bad on each tent. So to get through these in good time, I'm not going to spend too long doing a full in-depth review of each tent. There's loads of those on YouTube. If you've got anything that you'd like to add about any of the tents, please leave a comment. So this is the Star River UL2. I believe it's very similar to the Big Agnes Tiger Wall. It has a really big door. It's almost the full side of the tent comes away. Something I mentioned right away is that along these sides, the bathtub floor doesn't come very high at all, and it goes straight into mesh. So the Cloud Up and the Mongar, they both have another section of fabric above the bathtub floor. This will be better in warm weather. There will be more of a breeze, but if it rains really hard, there's a chance that the rain could bounce under the fly and up into the tent. It can actually lead to a lot of water in the tent. On the inside, you get a big pocket along the top and another smaller one down the foot end. There is also a small hook on the roof for a head torch, but there's no extra guy lines or extra pocket on the roof. There is plenty of room in here for 2 people lying side by side. However, the walls are very tapered, which I'll show you in a second. Definitely one positive feature of the Star River is that it is a full mesh door on both sides, and the walls are completely mesh. So even with both doors entirely done up, it'd still be a nice breeze on a warm evening. If you're looking for a tent that you're going to use in hot weather, then this will definitely be much cooler in the evening than the other 2 freestanding tents. And that brings me to the point that I wanted to make about the tapering walls of this tent. So the base is the same width as the Mongar 2 and is comfortably wide enough for 2 wide sleeping pads. However, the walls taper sharply so that the top of the tent is very narrow. Now this tapering means that you only have full headroom through the middle of the tent. If you're sharing this tent, then these walls will be pressing up against you. It makes it feel really claustrophobic inside. And if you sit up at all, you just feel constantly pressed against the side of the tent. Now to the Mongar 2. So right away, this has a higher bathtub floor, and also the fly screen mesh doesn't start until here all the way around. So it's got much more protection against weather and cold wind. However, in warmer climates, it also doesn't allow as much breeze through. So on a hot night, this will feel hot. The door is really big, so it gives a really giant entrance. So it's got the same good sized pocket each end. It also has 2 extra pockets on the top, as well as having this string threaded through already for a washing line or for wanting to hang anything on. I think the main winning feature with the Mongar is it's huge. And unlike the Star River, it doesn't have good headroom only in the middle, but all over the tent, you can pretty much sit completely upright. You could have 4 people in here playing cards quite happily. Honestly, you could almost do a yoga workout inside this tent. Okay, this is the Summiture tent. Obviously, I've pitched this with the fly. I could have pitched this body only if I would have used a couple of loops of cord to hold the top of the poles, and then you get the idea, the whole thing is mesh. Now the doors are T-style doors. So there are 3 zips which meet in the middle. I've only seen one video review of this tent online, and he said the zip failed on the first evening. They do feel quite rough. I'll just see if I can... So that does feel like it's dragging slightly to me. So I'm not sure about the zips, maybe 0.1. The bathtub floor is very low. It's probably 4 inches off the ground at best. And this is with an absolutely perfect pitch on flat ground, on grass, where I was able to get the stakes in well. And I know from experience with the Lanshan, the 3FUL tent, that if you have uneven ground, especially which rises beneath the middle of the tent, it will very easily flatten out the bathtub floor. If you've then got heavy rain puddling in the campsite, or even splashing underneath, it will fill your tent with water. The walls of the inner tent are completely mesh. So again, warm evenings, this is going to be nice and cool. We'll have a look inside. Come on then. Something else a bit strange, which is no doubt something to do with the way I've pitched the tent, is the floor lifts. I feel like if I made the pitch any slacker, then the fly would not be taut. There are 2 tiny little pockets either end of the tent, which you could put a head torch in. There's good headroom, and it is a good length. Do those little extra support poles, which I'll show you in a second, add any real extra headroom. For 2 people, I don't really know. I'm sitting up now, and I don't have a sleeping pad, so I'm all the way on the ground. And as I do, my head is touching the roof all the way. So it is very wide all the way along though, so you do get generous headroom right across the middle of the tent. And now onto the Cloud Up 2, a bit of an oddity really. It's a copy of the Big Agnes Fly Creek, and it's only got this small front opening door. This is the 2-person Cloud Up. Apologies for the spoilers, but if you are 2 people, skip this tent. This is a 1.5 person tent, in my opinion. This one does have a solid wall above halfway. So again, if it's a warm evening, this is going to be a bit stuffy. Now getting into the tent, generally you go feet first. You can go head first if you're 1 person on your own and then do a little turn around. Only right at the entrance here do you have decent headroom. As you go further back, now my head is touching both sides of the tent. If you were 2 people laying down in here, you would not have much room. This will not fit 2 wide sleeping pads, only 2 regular sleeping pads. Also, if you're 2 people in here and one needs to use the bathroom in the night, then likely you are going to step on your partner's head trying to get in or out. Getting in or out usually requires a little bit of this. And you can imagine that if you were trying to get back in and somebody else was asleep in the tent and you're trying to do it quietly, it's very difficult. As you can probably see with only me in the tent, there's not that much room in here. I take up the whole door. There's only 1 door. The other tents have 2 doors each. Also, the walls are pitched entirely to a point. There is no spreader bar, so the walls just go like that. There is a small pocket either side, which would hold a phone, Kindle, head torch. I'll do the yoga test in here just for fun. All of these tents have a 15 denier fly sheet. They all look and feel the same other than the Summiture 2, which I think is just a different color of material. I can't tell from the specs that it's any different. So to peg out the vestibule or the doors on the Star River, you need to pull it out in 2 places, as opposed to the Mongar, which is just 1. Now, if you didn't have very good ground for putting pegs in, this might be difficult to get a good pitch because, for example, on the Mongar, you can just put 1 rock either side, pull it taut, and you've got a fairly decent pitch. Whereas on this, you kind of have to juggle having sort of 6 or 8 pegs in the ground, and you kind of need them there. Now, the Star River has a door either side, but it also has 2 zips either side. I'll be honest, I don't get it. Neither one is really where I would like it to be. I think this would be the ideal location for having a zip, but there isn't one there. There's one down here, And now there's one here as well. Now I'll show you the awning that it makes after. You're left with this flap, which you can roll up here. It does leave this space nice and open. However, if it's raining and you're completely zipped up, then you've got to try and get out of one of these two doors. And I don't know which one's the right one. And I have used this tent for multiple nights in bad weather, and yeah, it's got me vexed. Okay, so if I'm going to try and get in through this door, this space is now very narrow, and the zips to get in are all the way on the other side. If your inside door is zipped up, then you have to, try and crawl through to get all the way to the zip, which is down here. If it were raining, you would not want to open this zip to try and get out through this door. Because the wall is pitched so steeply, rain will come inside the tent immediately as soon as you open this zip. The fly on the Star River doesn't come down very low on the head end. You're likely to get condensation on the inside of this wall, quite a lot of it if you're in a damp area, and you might get a wet head, wet sleeping bag, wet pillow. There are also no roof vents in the top of the Star River. And the fly does come very close to the ground along the back 3/4 of the tent. So if you are somewhere where there's going to be a lot of condensation, you're likely to get even more in the Star River. Onto the Mongar, we have nice big vents either end. I feel like the fly comes low enough. It's lower than the Star River. Maybe it could be a touch lower for really bad weather or for when there's a lot of condensation, but I haven't had any problems with getting a damp sleeping bag in this tent. The door is nice and easy to use. It's one zip, straight up the middle, and that can be folded back on either one or both sides. So you can have the whole tent completely open. And also during wet weather, I find it really easy to get in and out of through this front door.
Mongar offers way more protection from rain when you open the doors. It actually covers the entire body, so unless the rain's coming in diagonally, it's going to be much better than the Star River at keeping the rain out. And now I'm a T-Rex. Rawr!
Each side of the fly only requires one peg, making it much easier to set up than the Star River. Also, if you don't have any ground where you can put pegs in, you can just use one big rock and one small rock to hold each side out. Okay, where do I start with the Summiture? Obviously, this is a very different tent to the other three. It's nowhere near as straightforward as any of the others we're putting up. I'm not sure if I have a good pitch on the tent. I've done some research. I've used a lot of tents like this, including the Lanchans, and I think it's set up quite well. However, the fly is incredibly close to the ground all the way around. Yes, it does have big vents in the roof, but this is still going to lead to a lot of condensation depending on where you camp. If I was camping somewhere damp and I'd set up like this tent would be completely soaked in the morning. Usually on the Lanchan, for example, you make the poles longer and then you get a bigger gap here. I've tried that with this tent and it's maxed out the tension that I can put on the inner of the tent, and yet still it's really tight to the ground. It has one central door, just like the Mongar, and that can be rolled up both sides. Obviously it has two doors on the other side as well. Are these extender poles making any real difference? From the looks of it, I would say yes, but from the feel when I'm lying down in the tent, I'd say I'm not sure. I have the Lanchan still, and it feels bigger inside than this does. I will test them side by side, and I'll do another review of just those two tents next to each other. I am also going to say that this requires a lot of pegs to get set up properly. And even just this one end part has to have two pegs. It needs this one, and it needs this one. Otherwise, it's just not going to be able to be slept in. I know that this is aimed more at ultralight and hiking and people who are already carrying their trekking poles and are likely to be camping in areas which maybe have nice grass or a decent campsite. However, if you can't find those things, that's going to be a really limiting factor for this tent. And last but not least, the cloud up. So in order to peg out the vestibule and the door, you need two pegs, and you pull it out towards you like this. However, in order to get the fly really taut all the way around, you kind of do need to put in 3 more pegs, one either side and one at the back. Otherwise, there is a lot of room and a lot of movement between the fly and the body. The door of the cloud up, well, the door of the cloud up is the door of the cloud up. And as you can see, with it open, you still basically have to either crawl in forward or try and go feet first. The zip is really difficult to get to sometimes. It's all the way up at the top. I owned the Cloud Up, the original, for a long time. And although I have many positive things to say about it, one of the negatives has got to be this door. You get really tired of it in the end. You get tired of trying to turn around in there, trying to go in backwards, forwards. You're not sure how. If it's wet and raining, you're going to kick mud and crap and stuff in there. And if you are using this vestibule for any of your stuff, you've got to climb over all of it to get inside. It is what it is. The door's rubbish. Now, onto vestibules and awnings. And that's where a couple of these tents get more interesting. So this is the Star River and its awning. So this is just the original door flap raised up on 2 trekking poles and 1 guy outline on the outside here. You can do this on either side, so if there were 2 people with 2 sets of trekking poles, you could have both awnings out. A difference on the Star River's awning to the Mongar's awning is you don't have any extra fabric between where you've unzipped the door. So now these sections are just open. If you were using this awning because of bad weather, now all the bad weather can just get straight in through these side walls. Also, because the opening to the actual tent body is right here, if it was raining, the rain is going to come into the inner of the tent. Another thing is that when you're not using the awning, because the walls are so pitched and close to the body of the tent, you have a very flat, low vestibule. So there's not actually much room to do anything unless you do use this awning. They do also give you this extra piece of fabric that you can clip in the corner here as some kind of dry holding space. I wouldn't have said it's going to do much, to be honest. It'd be a nice feature, but a bit of a gimmick. Onto the undisputed king of awnings and vestibules. This is the Mongar 2. It has this enormous awning. It's only on one side of the tent. The other side is just a door. But this side has the option of either being just a door, or you zip in this second piece of fabric, which is rolled up onto the other side, and you can turn it into this huge awning. Now, this awning, in my opinion, is much better than the Star River awning because it has this extra fabric. So now, even if it's raining really hard, and I have used this in very heavy rain, then you can leave this open all night without worrying that rain is going to get in to where you're sleeping in the inner. I'm comfortably sat well under it now. Even with my feet out, I still wouldn't be in the rain. So even though the Mongar only has 1 awning, I would still say it's such a better awning than the Star River that it wins for awnings. The Mongar in general also has just a much bigger vestibule space, even without using the awning, and it's much more usable. Because the wall is completely flat on the inside and tapered on the outside, you just get a big usable space where you could actually cook. So on the Star River, the inner body of the tent is sort of tapering into the vestibule, and you end up with just this weird narrow space that you couldn't really do much in. Now the Summiture 2 has 2 vestibules, one either side, and they're a good size. Obviously you can't sit in the vestibule, but you could conceivably cook in here. You could also have your backpack and the rest of your whatever cycling stuff, motorcycling stuff. It would fit in here fairly well. Obviously this is aimed as a hiking tent or a bikepacking tent, and as such, for those types of tents, it has a really good sized vestibule. And now onto the Cloud Up, I guess. I was tempted to do a funny kind of, well, there isn't a vestibule bit, but, well, there isn't a vestibule. If you've got any stuff at all, just your shoes, then they have to go here if they're dirty, and that means that's all of your space taken. And with it zipped up, it is so low and steep that I really wouldn't risk cooking in it, because it's also your only way in or out of the tent. I would say that you definitely couldn't cook in the vestibule of this tent, or you shouldn't. It's very dangerous and it's very small. And onto my final thoughts of these 4 tents. The 3 freestanding tents are so close in weight and yet so far apart in room and features that I feel like only one of them really stands out above the rest, and that's the Mongar 2. The Cloud Up 2 is just not a 2-person tent, and it's only 150 grams lighter than the Mongar 2. If you are looking for a roomier 1-person tent, rather than going for the Cloud Up 2, I'd recommend getting the Mongar 1. Then you get that huge awning and the vestibule and the better door for getting in and out. You might think, oh, I can use the Cloud Up 2 for 2 people every now and again, though. You really can't. It's too tight in there. And then to the Star River. I wanted to like the Star River. I bought the Star River before I bought the Mongar. And just right off the bat, I couldn't understand so many of the things. Like why are the walls pitched so steeply? And why are the 2 zips for the doors at opposite ends of the tent? Why couldn't we have just one in the middle? I also found it very claustrophobic in there with the pitched walls. I'd say the only time that I would choose the Star River over the Mongar is if I knew I was going to be doing an extended section where it was going to be very, very hot. It would just be really nice to be able to have that breeze flowing through the tent, where with the Mongar, you've got those solid walls. And without question for me, the best tent is the Mongar 2. The Star River is only 10 grams less weight than the Mongar. And for the Mongar, you just get all of that room on the inside. You get the huge vestibules, you get the massive awning. It's genuinely fit for 2 people. And I would quite happily use it long-term for 2 people. The Star River, I wouldn't use for more than a couple of nights with 2 people. It's just too stuffy in there. I want to say something quickly about the Summiture as well. I will say, if you're going on a hiking trip, let's say a through hike, and you are purely focused on weight and you're already taking trekking poles, and if you have to buy a Naturehike tent, then go for the Summiture 2. Also, the Mongar is by far the easiest to erect, easiest erection, the best to erect out of the tents. The loser definitely being the Summiture 2. That thing is very picky. Okay, there we have it. If you've jumped right to the end only to get the opinion, then all you need to know is buy the Mongar 2, forget the rest of them. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.